introductions. That should be on. Hi, we're messing with the camera, so when you get extra stuff like this, it's going to be very annoying. All right. Okay. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm really blessed to serve here with a partner in Pastor O'Donnell who guards me from myself. So I was in Seward, Nebraska this last week with a bunch of kids from our church. And on the way home, on the bus on the way home, my voice completely let go. Thankfully, it remained while I was teaching, while we were there. And then we got on the bus and it completely said, "No, you're done." And so,
nothing to do with all the illegal things you did while you were away.
See, I'm so blessed to serve here with such a kind partner. And so last night, I didn't have to come and do liturgy, which was great because he kind of covered it and you helped, is what I understand. Not last night. So yeah.
I have my limits.
You have your limits too, yeah. And then this morning, I was grateful that the Reverend Shaolin Trump was here to do the front half of the liturgy, so I could do the service of the sacrament. And then we get a chance this morning to hear from one of our congregational members, who happens to be the coordinator for all of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod mission work on the continent of Africa. That's big.
You can tell by the stunned silence.
Yeah. So, Reverend Shaolin Trump, our brother in Christ and our church member, we would love to hear about your work.
Wonderful.
Let's welcome him.
Good morning. It's wonderful to see you all. As Pastor said, we are members of this congregation. I am my family, and we appreciate your faithful and kind and generous support. My family is here with me, all at this table right here, and one looking for a cup of water somewhere. That's my wife, Krista. The very tall one is Josiah, who's 15, right behind me here. Elijah, who's 13. Isaiah, who's 11. Jeremiah, looking for water, who's 8. And then Esther, who's 4 years old. Since this is a Bible study hour, we're going to start with a little bit of Bible. Do you guys do that here? Perfect. That's great then. So here we're going to start with Psalm 67. This is one of the great mission psalms of the Psalter, of the song book, the hymn book of the Old Testament. And let's read this. How about if we all read the odd verses and then I'll read the even verses, okay? So let's start by reading together. May God be gracious to us and bless us, and make his face to shine upon us, that your way may be known on earth, your saving power among all nations.
Let the people praise you, O God. Let all the people praise you.
Let the nations be glad and sing for joy, for you judge the peoples with equity and guide the nations upon earth.
Let the people praise you, O God. Let all the people praise you.
The earth has yielded its increase. God, our God, shall bless us.
God shall bless us. Let all the ends of the earth fear him.
And what I want you to really notice about this is how many times we are directed outward in this song of praise to all peoples, all nations, all the earth. This is really about making God's salvation known across all of his creation. It's still his, it's very much his. Every single person he desires to be in his family, in his Israel, his new Israel. And so he's directing us again and again and again. And at the very beginning of this, we solicit the Lord's blessing. The same type of blessing that we solicit or that we are given at the end of the service each Sunday in the Aaronic benediction. You recognize the phrase, his face to shine upon us. And then at the very end here, we see that we do indeed receive that blessing. But what I love about this psalm is that it's not just, Lord, bless us because we love to revel in it. It's not just pour out your grace and mercy on us because it's good for us. No, in this psalm, as in some other texts in the New Testament, we are reminded God's blessing comes so that, right here, be gracious and bless us so that your way may be known on earth. Not just for us. Bless us, be on us, be in us, so that your kingdom may expand, so that we may be a part of your glorious work of drawing all people to you. And he does. He does draw all people to him, so that the very ends of the earth will fear him. And that's why we send missionaries. That's why the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod sends missionaries, to show the love of God to the entire earth. So here we have Africa. Some of you over here won't be able to see too well, so we'll rely on the center section for our geography quiz. Is everyone studied up? Okay, perfect. All right, we'll start easy. What's this big island off the coast of Africa? See? You guys are great. Okay, what is this one way up here in the corner with the Red Sea coming up into it? Egypt, yeah. How about down here in southern Africa? Is there a country? South Africa, yeah. All right, here it is. How about this one in this corner? Morocco. I heard Morocco. That's right. And right down here is Kenya. Good job. I'll switch over so you can see the names of the countries. Here's Kenya, right here. And Kenya is where we live. It's where we're based. And from that base, we have relationships with some 30 to 35 church bodies across the whole continent. In all of these different countries, over 20 countries that we have relationships in. And managing those relationships, managing the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod's partnerships there and the work that we do there as international mission, that's all part of my role. So I'm the regional director for Africa. Africa is one region, and I get to do all kinds of things there in support of all those church bodies, representing the synod to them, representing them to our synod and its congregations and its institutions and its schools and its seminaries, leading a team, preaching, baptizing, all of those things, and all that from Kenya. Kenya is a good place to be based. It's kind of a central hub for all of Africa. So we have a fairly well-developed banking system. We have fairly well-developed infrastructure. We have direct flights to almost every country in Africa out of Nairobi. We have good medicine, so people who need medical evacuation are often brought to Kenya for treatment. It's a good place to be, and it's a place where you see Africa and kind of globalization and development meet. So an example of that would be how we fortify foods in the developed world for the sake, especially of our very small children, right? So here we are looking for how in Kenya we can fortify foods for the smallest of the small to maintain good health for everybody, the vitamins and minerals they need. Well, you can't fortify flour because everyone grows their own corn and it's ground right there in the village by the village grinder. There's no central processing. You can't fortify milk because milk comes from your own cow or your neighbor's cow. So they were looking for something that's centrally processed where they can easily add fortification, and what they stumbled on was margarine. Margarine is made centrally. It's easy to add in the process of making margarine. So here you see margarine is advertised as having 5 vitamins and minerals with energy to learn and to play. So they began to market, feed your children margarine for their good health. Well, the problem is, turns out kids don't actually like margarine. So then they had to get creative, and what you see here now is chocolate margarine. And it tastes every bit as you can imagine chocolate margarine would taste. But kids will eat it a little more than normal margarine. So this intersection of globalization, development, and Africa. I love the billboards around Africa. In Nairobi, we have 2 languages. In Kenya, there's 2 languages. English and Swahili are both national languages. But in Nairobi itself, just in that one city, there's a 3rd language called Shang. And Shang is a mixture of proper English, proper Swahili, Pidgin English, and slang. So Pidgin English would be English written or pronounced the way a local person would pronounce based on the language they kind of grew up in, right? So here we have a sign that says it's for this medicine, dissolve the pain, chop chop. So what would that mean? Dissolve the pain? Quickly, yeah, just dissolve the pain quickly. I love this picture because you see this water truck right here. That's a water truck. So Nairobi is a city of about 5 million people, but it lacks the basic infrastructure for a city. We don't have enough water for the population. Any given neighborhood has their water turned on by the city about 1 day a week. During that day, the water from the city flows to your home. You fill up big tanks either in your ceiling or up on a tower outside, and then you try to stretch that water to last you all week until the water gets turned on to your neighborhood again. Well, when you run out, you have to get someone to deliver water. So they have these water trucks. Except now, globalization and development, you can summon the water truck to give you the essential fundamental need of water by mobile app or scanning the QR code on the back. Here's another sign. Double weekdays. What does double mean? Double. Yeah, it's just written and pronounced. It's Pidgin English, written and pronounced the way someone who's a Bantu speaker would say it. This one has some proper Swahili in it. Dependable quality, ni yetu, that means dependable quality is ours. This one here is an advertisement for sausage, and down here, kila baiti na slap. So kila is the proper Swahili word for each or every. Bite is the English word, a bite of food. Ina is the prefix, the verbal prefix for it is or it does. And slap is the English slang. This means every bite slaps. Every bite's delicious. Every bite is spicy. Okay? And the bite in a slap. Here we have good old KFC. Even KFC gets into this shang. So good, crush at the box. So good, that's all English, right? Crush refers to your hopeful boyfriend or girlfriend, someone you have a crush on. Ingia will enter into, and box here is used in two ways. One refers to kind of the box meal at KFC, but in this context, it's also referring to a relationship. So this is English slang for a relationship. So what this means is KFC is so good, when you ask her out, she'll say yes. And if you notice down here, if you don't want to go out to eat, we have Uber Eats in Nairobi. Uber Eats. But of course, you have sent us for something that is far, far more important than eating KFC. You have sent us to tell people about Jesus. And that is what the church does. This is the motto of international mission for the LCMS. Spread the gospel, plant Lutheran churches, and show mercy. And this centerpiece, this keystone, planting Lutheran churches, is what it's all about. We are looking for generations-long impact. Telling someone about Jesus, seeing them come to faith through the Holy Spirit, seeing them tell their children, raise their children in the faith, and generation upon generation building, and the church will grow. And we do that by supporting it with spreading the gospel and showing mercy. So we have a great number of programs in all of these different areas. I'm just going to focus on a couple today. Ministries of compassion or mercy, ways that we show mercy. In Africa, of course, there are so many opportunities to show mercy, to tell people as you're caring for them, as you're loving them. And the one I'll tell you about today is in this little corner of Tanzania. In this particular place in Tanzania, there is a significantly higher percent of the genetic mutation that leads to albinism. So significantly higher than most other places in the world. And the interesting thing about Tanzania is about 30% Christian, about 30% Muslim, and almost all the rest practice African traditional religions, which means they go to their village witch doctors in Uganda for treatment of any number of ailments or concerns or petitions that they would like to bring forward to the spiritual realm. Well, in this kind of a context, the witch doctor holds a great amount of control and power in the village. The witch doctor is constantly looking for ways to harness energy and power from the environment. Anything that is unusual or pure holds power. A small baby child with albinism is unique and different, and in the view of the witch doctor, must have power within their body. Children with albinism in this part of Tanzania were not reaching adulthood. They weren't making it. The witch doctors would utilize this child and try to gain power for their clients, or whatever their clients may be. People who had children with albinism approached the church and said, please help us protect our children. And the church said, we have the teaching of the church. The sacrifices of the witch doctor are meaningless. We know God himself provided the sacrifice that transcends all time and all space, that extends over all creation, even to us. And there can be no greater sacrifice to access the spiritual world than that of Jesus Christ, which is all true and did not sway a great many people. So they said, okay, let's have a backup plan. Where can we find a place of refuge for these children with albinism? So in this part of Tanzania, there's a diamond mine owned by the Williamson Company, used to be owned by De Beers, and this is a traditional mining town. The whole town is owned by the diamond company, right? You have to go through security to come in. They don't want you to come in with a gun and steal all their money. You have to go through security to go out. They don't want you to take any diamonds with you when you're leaving their city. So this is a secure town. And inside of this town, there's a Lutheran church, there's a Lutheran grade school, and there's a Lutheran secondary school. And so the church said, what if we established on the primary school campus some homes for children with albinism, and the parents can bring those children there. They're in a safe environment. They can grow up, go to school at the Lutheran school, go through confirmation class with the pastor, be members of the Lutheran church, go to the high school, they're the boarding high school, learn a trade, and then by the time they're young adults, they can re-enter society, and they don't have any value anymore for the witch doctor. They're grown up. Us grown-ups are impure in this worldview. So albinism is only the lack of melanin in your body. Your body doesn't generate melanin, which means that you don't have dark skin, you don't have dark hair, you don't have dark eyes. And the risks of albinism are skin cancer and then blindness. Eventually the eye is overwhelmed by the light. There's no other defect or anything associated with it. So it's simply just lack of melanin in the body. Thank you, that's a really good question. So the church decided to build homes in this city, this diamond town. And in each of these homes, there's a matron's room, a mother's room, and then several rooms for children, and they're kind of in small family units. So there's no more than 8 or 10 children kind of in each unit, and they have meals together, and they have showers and toilets and a kitchen. And those children now are growing up safe and protected and in the schools and learning and developing and becoming faithful Lutheran church members, young people who have heard the gospel message through this act of mercy and compassion and are now rejoicing not only in growing up, but in growing up with Jesus Christ as their Savior. The other thing I want to tell you about is a little bit about church planting and training for the church plants. So in Africa we have, I'm going to ask questions at the end, all right? Is that okay? In Africa we have no problem with churches being planted. There are so many churches planted so quickly that the church leaders often don't know until that new congregation has sprung up and comes to the church leader and says, can you provide a pastor for our congregation? Well, there's not enough pastors. Every pastor in Africa is overseeing between 5 and 15 congregations, and he's trying his best to provide service and love and care for all those congregations. So the church constantly asked us, the most significant and most frequent request we get is to help them in forming church workers, forming pastors, forming deaconesses. And so we have a great number of different ways that we support the church in doing that. All of these countries in red have some route to ordination. Most of these are the same kind of routes to ordination that we use in the Lutheran Church of Missouri Synod at our seminaries. So this is 3 years of education, Greek and Hebrew, and then a year of internship or vicarage. Although at the end of that training, they may receive just a certificate or just a diploma, not a bachelor's degree, not a master's degree like our pastors receive, but the same formation, the same training. Well, we don't have missionaries in all these places. Most of these seminaries and routes to ordination are managed directly by the church body. And so they're asking us for help gaining credentials for their pastors because they comply with the government regulations on education. They want to elevate the levels of their seminary, provide better training. And so we didn't have a place that we could send them for studying like in a bachelor's program. But we partnered with our partner in Riga, Latvia, which has a seminary, and they have a Latvian language stream, and they have an online English stream at the seminary. Most of the program was developed by LCM missionaries over the last 5 or 7 years. And the program has students from all over in it, primarily from Europe. And so we asked if we could provide some support and send just 2 students through and see how they would do. So we sent 2 students from very different contexts. Pastor Davis Wola is the president of his church body in Malawi. He lives in a town, he drives a car, he had a small computer already that he would use. So we said, we would like you to enroll in this bachelor's program because he'd been asking for a bachelor's program, and see if you can do this from your home. And we provided him with a computer that could get online a little easier. We provided him with a little mobile data dongle that plugs in. And every month we provided him with a data bundle so that he could access the online courses. The other pastor we sent through is Pastor John Jacquier from South Sudan, who lives in a refugee camp in Kenya. For him, we had to provide a computer, a mobile data package, a mobile dongle, and solar panels, and power inverters and batteries, because he doesn't have power in his home. Well, now we're at the end of this program. Both of these two students have made it all the way through, and they're in the midst of writing their bachelor's theses. So here they are. They would say the favorite part of the program is the 1-week intensive in Europe. Here they are in Latvia, learning a little bit about Reformation history, and they would spend time with the other students in their cohort that's passed through. You may think they're discussing deep theology here. I think they're actually playing the game of Risk. Well-formed pastors in all. Now that these two are almost all the way through the program, they're finishing up these months right now, we are doing a large intake of pastors from across the continent. We'll do about a quarter of the churches that we work with will be offered scholarships in each of the next 4 years. By the end of that time, we'll have between 45 and 60 pastors from all those different countries enrolled in this program if they have the minimum qualifications to enter an accredited program in Europe, and then they will largely be going back to teaching in those seminaries to continue to raise up more pastors for the church. A few students already had a bachelor's degree, and they would like their seminary in their country to be elevated up to offer a bachelor's degree, so they need their professors to have master's degrees. And so we worked with Concordia Seminary in St. Louis to develop a program that's an online program. It runs one cohort at a time. Concordia St. Louis developed this program for us, for the Africa region, and we sent 6 men through it. They've received the same kind of technology package. They have a 1-week intensive in Europe, and these are the 6 that we sent through. These are pastors who come from Ghana, from Sudan, from Kenya, and from Uganda. And these men meet once a year in our field office in Nairobi. That's our field office. It's built around a chapel in the center. And the professor from St. Louis Seminary comes out to teach. And I have to tell you about this very white guy right here in the middle of this picture. That is Reverend Dr. David Erber. Reverend Dr. David Erber, some 38 years ago, was sent for his vicarage overseas to Nigeria with his wife. And he has served now on the continent for Lutheran Church Missouri Synod for 38 years. He is a hero of the church. When we were looking at starting this program and I was looking at our staff, this is the man I knew had the connections and the experience and the history to bring a program about with one of our seminaries just for our region. And he has. These students met just 2 weeks ago in our field office in Nairobi again to work on their master's theses. They're finishing up their master's theses now. And when they complete those in the end of this summer and the early beginning of the fall, they will have finished an online master's program with Concordia St. Louis. And then we will do an intake to do a full cohort. St. Louis says the full cohort size will be 12 to 15 students. So now we will open this to 12 to 15 more students. But that guy right there has announced his retirement. So what I said is, please, if I can beg you, just extend a little bit and get this cohort graduated, this trial, this test graduated, get the next cohort enrolled and get them just into their first class, and then I'll let you retire. If he does that, he will have served 40 years on the field in Africa for you, for the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. True heroes of the church. That's how we do it. We plant churches. We do have missionaries in a number of countries, not a lot. There's not a lot of missionaries on the field right now. This, of course, is our family, and I'll mention here that Krista also works for the mission. She works as a project secretary and a coordinator of our regional events. Over all those partners that you saw we had, we issue between 50 and 100 grants per year to those partners from the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And that's to run seminaries, to run the Home for Children with Albinism, to run our Project 24 sites in Kenya for children, kind of a great broad spectrum of different things. Krista manages all of those grants. And now that we have a little 4-year-old girl who will start school next month, we're going through a big change in our family. This will be the first time in 15 years we don't have a small child at home. So keep us in prayer. We're a little nervous what it's going to look like, but what it has given is Krista a little more freedom to expand her hours that she works for the mission. She's worked part-time for almost 10 years. Now she's working full-time for the mission in support of the work. There's Reverend Dr. David Erber, our 38, almost 40 years on the field, and his wife Joyce. Joyce is the regional business manager. On this side we have Mr. John Wolf, he's our regional project director. And over there is Shara Osiro. She coordinates all of our shared services, shared ministries, everything from translation to short-term teams, communications, conferences, Luther Academy conferences, all of those things. Up here we have Brian and Kia Payne, Pastor Brian and Deaconess Kia. They serve at a seminary in Tanzania. Over there we have Pastor Eric Stinnett, serves at a seminary in Ethiopia. Down here, Pastor Jonathan Klausing serves at a different seminary in Tanzania. Over in the corner, Miss Britt Odemba, she supports any work with children. Her specialty is early childhood education. She's an education consultant, so our program, for example, the Children's Home for Children with Albinism, she's deeply involved in supporting that. And then on this page, we have Reverend Dr. Fernando Hoof in South Africa, Reverend Volmir Darocha in South Africa at the seminary, both of them, and Pastor Elton Fisher, Reverend Dr. Elton Fisher, teaching at the seminary in Kenya. And I put these three on a page by themselves because these missionaries are not actually LCMS members. These missionaries are actually members of the church in Brazil, our fellowship partner in Brazil. And they represent the long-term vision and goal and work of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. In 1899, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod and Convention decided to send missionaries. One of the places we decided to send missionaries was Brazil. Now, it wasn't so strange. Remember, at that time, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod was primarily recent German immigrants, right? German was the language of the church. That's who we were. Well, some of the siblings or distant cousins of our people in the United States had immigrated to Brazil, particularly southern Brazil. So there was a recognition of like-minded people, perhaps an easy mission field to start Lutheran churches in. And so they were sent, the very next year, the convention sent the first missionary to Brazil. A couple years later, they sent the second missionary to Brazil, established a seminary. For a while, the church was growing and being led by missionaries from the LCMS. Eventually, it became a district of the LCMS. It was called the Brazil District of the LCMS. Turned over eventually to leadership of the local church as more pastors were available to take leadership roles in the church. Became a church that's independent, so this would be then a daughter church of the LCMS, planted by the LCMS. And they have a seminary, very robust seminary system. Anytime they would have too many graduates from the seminary, they would look at their national budget and say, okay, we will send all the extra graduates to mission work in the Amazon. And so they would send missionaries internally in Brazil into the Amazon. Well, a few years ago, they had too many graduates. This is just around COVID. There was a shortfall in the budget, and they were very concerned about not being able to place new graduates at their seminary. They had always placed their graduates. At the same time, the LCMS had a shortfall in the number of missionaries we had. We had openings that were unmet. And so we got together and we established what we call the Alliance Project with Brazil to send Brazilian pastors into LCMS mission. And so with our colleagues, as part of our team, engaged in the places we have directed and we have strategic plans, now these members of the church in Brazil serve right alongside us. And this is the end goal of telling somebody about Jesus. That over generations, their family would expand and the grandparents would have an impact upon all those who followed, and the church would grow and people would hear about Jesus Christ, become faithful members, believing in the gospel of Jesus Christ and conveying it on to the next generation, and establishing a church to support that, and that church then would send its own missionaries to tell others about Jesus. So on behalf of the church in Brazil, who sees the fruits of the work of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod over the last 125 years, and on behalf of all the students who are just finishing up their master's programs, and their bachelor's programs, and all those beautiful children in the Home for Children with Albinism, I would like to say thank you, because this is your work. You are the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. All of this work is funded, almost in its entirety, by congregations like yours and people like you. Every missionary out there, every program and project comes directly from support from people like you. So this is all your work. Thank you for what you do in Africa. And now I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes, please.
The North Africa area is opposed to physical missionary work. Does the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod have some strategy, or does the LCMS coordinate with other organizations to reach those people in the North Africa?
Could you please?
So the question is,
Pastor Trump. Yeah, I was going to say, please repeat
the question is, how come there wasn't any dark blue in North Africa? That's the question. Where are our partners in North Africa? So North Africa was instrumental in what you know as Christianity. Okay? In the earliest centuries after Christ, the church grew throughout the Roman Empire, which included all of North Africa. And North Africa was a key component, the influence, the thought that came out of that part of the world. Great theologians came from North Africa. Councils, and the idea of councils kind of came out of North Africa. And for hundreds of years, this was all Christian, all of it. Then after Islam began to expand out of the Arabian Peninsula, and it expanded primarily through war and conquering at that time, and an expansion of the secular and religious kingdom, it came all the way across North Africa and virtually wiped out the Christian presence. There are places like Ethiopia where there's a traditional and historic Coptic church that traces itself all the way back to the New Testament, the book of Acts. There are small gatherings of Christians in different places, but you may remember persecution of Christians in very public ways in Libya and in other settings in North Africa. So it is extremely difficult to engage in North Africa. There are churches in some places. So for example, in Sudan and South Sudan split about 10 years ago on religious lines. South Sudan is kind of primarily Christian. North Sudan itself is primarily Muslim, but there's a Lutheran church in Sudan, and in that Lutheran church in Sudan, they worship in Arabic. They sing hymns in Arabic. They are devout Lutherans, and in fact, the bishop of that church just passed away this year, and they had a service in Nairobi, a memorial service in Nairobi that I attended right before. It was like the week before we came here for home service, and in that service, it was in Arabic, and they sang their songs in Arabic, and the kind of memorial of the bishop was all given in Arabic. Arabic is, to my ears, not a very beautiful language, but what is beautiful is seeing that God is active, and the people were hearing the gospel, and they were eager, passionate supporters of their church and of their bishop. So there are churches in North Africa. As far as how we work there, Lutheran Hour Ministries has some satellite broadcast programs that work in North Africa. Lutheran Heritage Foundation translates materials into Arabic, a great number of materials. We work with churches in places like Eritrea, which is an absolutely closed country. I will never be able to travel to Eritrea because I'm publicly known to be a pastor. But there's a Lutheran church there that's a partner of ours, not a fellowship partner, but a partner of ours. And so in the ways that the Lord opens to us where we do have access, we try to engage. We would love to have an area facilitator for North Africa on our team. That would be one of roughly 40 open positions we have for missionaries in Africa. We are in desperate need. The vast majority of those positions are positions that the church has requested, where they identify they have a gap. They don't have personnel to fill some specific need, and they ask us then for a missionary to fill that gap. And that's everything from elementary school teachers to theological educators. We have a great number of theological educators in seminaries, to deaconesses, to help their deaconesses kind of continue to come up and form, all kinds of different avenues. So if you or anyone you know might particularly be well suited to missionary work in Africa or anywhere in the world, encourage them to apply. Encourage them to consider, and there's a little brochure right in the back there that looks just like this. Encourage them to consider inquiring about missionary service. At the same time, please give us their name so we can also encourage them to apply for missionary service. We're looking at generating leads and interest and finding people who are able and willing to serve alongside our team in the great work the Lord has sent us to do through His church. Other questions? Pastor.
I know this story, but it might be interesting for those who don't. You made a career transition from one thing to another. Can you spend a couple minutes talking about that, and then in the process of talking about that, maybe talk about how those skills have been useful to you in your missionary work?
So I'm from the West Coast. I was born in California, and I grew up in the Seattle area. I went to Concordia Lutheran School for grade school. I went to a secondary school, a high school in Tacoma. While I was in high school, I wanted to go into engineering. That was compelling and interesting to me, electrical engineering. And I had applied for a school in Seattle. I had scholarship money. And that was when I first kind of recognized that maybe I would be called into pastoral work at some point. And I went, we happened to have the seminary recruiters visit shortly after I kind of opened that possibility in my mind. And they said, you already have a scholarship in engineering. Go do engineering. Go finish that up, be an engineer for a little while, and then come to the seminary. So that's what I did. I went to school at Seattle Pacific University for engineering. I worked for about 5 years altogether in industry between Seattle and between North Carolina. And then from there I went to the seminary. And I didn't know how engineering would help me as a pastor. And when I went to the seminary, I wasn't even looking at mission work. I was just looking at the next step. The next step was seminary. While I was in the seminary, I was encouraged by professors to consider what they called the Missionary Formation Program, a program designed to form church planters and missionaries for overseas placement. And in St. Louis is where my wife, my bride. And so I applied into that program and was accepted, and then eventually I was sent overseas for my internship, my vicarage, which then converted to my first call. So I've never been a parish pastor. I've never had the joys and the challenges that your pastor has. They are greatly intimidating to me. Pray for your pastor. I see my work as easy in comparison to this mission context. But those skills in engineering, we were a publicly traded company. We had quarterly expectations of return on profit. And I was in research and development, and we had goals and targets, and we operated under a pretty tight management. And we had, of course, in engineering, you have linear thinking, right? You think very linearly. You always break things down into each step in a progression. The Lord prepared me. All of that is useful in my current work. I manage a team. I have long-term strategies in our engagement with partners. We don't look for quarterly results. We look for generations-long results. But those start with the step today and the step tomorrow. And so the Lord prepares us in the ways you least expect for significant changes in our lives. Leaving engineering, even though I knew I was going to, was a huge change. I had restored a 1965 Lincoln Continental convertible as an engineer, and then I sold it to go to seminary and pay for 1/4. But that's why I got a job where I met her. So I exchanged my convertible for my wife. Yes.
Do you use your electrical skills in Africa?
Not, my skills were in very, very low-level programming. So I don't use those skills in Africa, but basic understanding of power is of use. And so they've transferred in some ways. And the programming is what gives you the linear thought and progression. And so that's been of use to me, yeah. The Lord uses it. Yeah.
I'm curious, do other denominations, let's say Wisconsin Synod, ELCA, do they have a missionary presence in Africa?
Yeah, the ELCA has a missionary presence in some places. We don't engage with them almost hardly at all. The Wisconsin Synod has missionaries in just a few countries, and we do engage with them regularly. They, especially if there's been a rift in a church, and one kind of side is staying with the LCMS, the other starts looking for new partners, and they often end up writing to Wisconsin Synod and things like that. Then those missionaries in Africa will write and say, hey, we got an inquiry from so-and-so, do you know them? And so then I'll correspond with our partners and I'll say, yeah, I do, here's a little what I know about the history and their situation. I don't direct their mission, we don't cooperate in what we're doing, but we collaborate in kind of sharing information. Yeah. Good question. Other questions? Yes?
If the water is somewhat rationed, what about the electricity in Nairobi?
Yeah, thank you. The question is, if we don't have water, if the water in any neighborhood is turned on just once a week, what about power? Kenya is very interesting as far as power generation. I believe it has the largest wind farm in Africa. It has substantial solar installations. It has the largest geothermal installation in Africa. But the grid is very precariously balanced. So when something goes wrong, it often leads to a cascading impact through the whole country, and the whole country just goes without power. So we regularly have power outages that'll last for days. like several times a year perhaps, and that's because something in the entire national grid has just cascaded through the whole system. They don't have enough backup routes, they don't have the automatic disconnects, so when something goes down, it overloads and perpetuates. We have small outages more frequently, of course. At our particular house, one of the reasons that we chose this house is because the landlord provides a generator. It's an automatic generator right there. And with the kind of travel that I do for the church, we wanted to make sure that everything in the home is as safe and secure and kind of seamless as possible for when I'm away. So usually when the power goes out, you see the power go out, everything goes down, and after about 15 seconds you can hear the generator kind of kick on and power the house back up. And that way my dear wife doesn't have to go out in the rain and try and fiddle with the generator to get power back to the house. So people have backup systems. There are many people who have generators or they have solar lights, so there's always lights that are available. You just kind of plan for it, you expect it. Whereas here, you know, when the power goes out, we're kind of just unable to function. Everything relies on stable power. Our whole economy is built on the expectation of stable power, and we don't have the systems to kind of deal with it when it's not there. Right here. Pastor had a question, but right
Do
here.
mean it.
Thank you, Pastor. When you are at home with your family, where do you go to church?
Yeah, we go to church with one of the English services of our fellowship partner in Kenya, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Kenya. And downtown, at their big congregation downtown, it's the Arch Cathedral because of their ecclesiology. They have a bishop and they have an archbishop. And so this is the Archbishop's congregation, so it becomes a cathedral. And they have an English service at 9 o'clock on Sundays. And they use the LSB predominantly in their service. And so we go there for worship. It is a little bit different than our setting here. Services are generally at least an hour and a half long, usually an hour and 45 minutes and sometimes longer. Because it's in the capital city, they're a little more time sensitive than people in congregations in the rural settings, which might go for 3 hours or even 4 hours for services. Usually sermons are about 45 minutes. I don't know if you've been to church yet this morning, but I asked Pastor to preach for 45 minutes today just to give you a taste. So, we'll see what it's like. And we sing a few songs as a congregation, but we also have choirs, and there's usually more than one choir. And when there's more than one choir, you have to balance the choirs. Every choir has to have the same number of songs. And so there's sometimes a lot of singing, but not always on the congregation's part. But it is a good place to worship, and it's a good place for our family. With my travel, I don't have a congregation that I'm responsible for. It wouldn't be fair to that congregation for me to be gone so much.
In your mission work, I'm assuming that you have Bible classes like we have here. And how receptive are the people to learning and studying the scriptures over there?
The question is, do we have Bible classes the way that we have them here, like a Bible study hour or evening Bible study? Not in quite the same way. I do know that some places do have evening gatherings for Bible study, and it's led by the pastor, usually led by the pastor, and there is time in the Word, but those often include also a lot of singing. It's fellowshipping together and singing together and then kind of studying some component of the Bible. I think the part of the reason it's more difficult is because if you're looking at the rural settings where most of the Lutherans are, you might walk an hour or 2 hours to get to the church on Sunday morning. And if you walk for an hour to get to church on Sunday morning, that's one of the reasons you have a long service. You don't want to walk that long for a 54-minute service and then walk all the way home. So it's an event, right? It's an event-oriented culture. You go to this event, you expect to spend time there. Doing an evening Bible study is not as easy to kind of accomplish that. But that's one of the reasons the sermons are longer. You know, the sermons are longer because that's really a time of both proclamation and teaching. That's the event everyone has come for.
Do you have food?
At the services?
Yeah.
It's not uncommon. Yeah, there can be food at the services. It kind of depends on the context. If you're in Madagascar, where they have the Malagasy Lutheran Church, and your service has 1,000 people in it, once in a while they'll have food, but not in the same way as kind of an after-service fellowship where there's 30 members in attendance. Yeah. Over here.
Do you have a sense for how many Lutheran people there are on the continent of Africa, especially compared to how many there are here in North America?
Yeah, more than all the rest of the world combined. So we have what we call the big three. Ethiopia is the largest Lutheran church in the world as far as active membership, people who worship on a Sunday. Like the state churches of Norway and Germany, like these are state churches, but not active worshiping members. And Ethiopia, which is, I would say, kind of marginally Lutheran. They're a union church body after the communist government, and so there are Presbyterian districts or groups in them. There are even some Baptist groups in them and some Lutheran groups in them. But that church has 12 million members. Lutheran Church Missouri Synod has a little less than 2 million members. And they're growing at 12% a year. So then we have two other large church bodies. In Tanzania, the Lutheran Church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Tanzania, has about 5 million members. And in Madagascar, the Malagasy Lutheran Church has about 5 million members. So right there, you've got a huge number of Lutherans. And that is the predominant expression of Lutheran faith today, is in Africa.
Good question. Is the Catholic Church as pronounced in Africa?
It kind of depends. Yes, the Catholic Church is active. There are Catholic congregations. It kind of depends on who the colonial influence was. So in places like Kenya and Uganda, the colonial power was England. The Church of England is fairly strong, the Anglican Church. In places that were under French colonial influence, was intact but a little bit less. The French colonial governments were not as open to side-by-side mission work as the Anglican and the UK, the English colonial powers. So the Roman Catholic Church is active there, but not due necessarily to a kind of partnership and a tie-in, but just because it's a large church body with presence around the world and resources. So yeah, there are Roman Catholics in places to a greater or lesser extent. Pentecostals is the largest kind of self-identified Christian group. Pentecostals, yeah. And a great amount of that is prosperity gospel. So very, very far removed from what we know as
So you might, before you go to the next question, you might explain what prosperity gospel is.
Yeah, the prosperity gospel is our innate theology of glory. It's the belief that if I do something for God, God has to do something for me, right? That I have some control over the spiritual realm. And this works kind of well in the African traditional religions. All of the African traditional religious expression is intended to influence the spiritual realm. So prosperity gospel fits into that. Prosperity gospel is primarily focused on resource transfer from the parishioner to the head of the church. And then if you do that, if you give, then the Lord will bless you. Give me a motorcycle, the Lord will give you a car. That's kind of the groundwork of the prosperity gospel. And the prosperity gospel is extremely lucrative. There was a time where the most significant market for private jets in the world was Nigeria. And that was all prosperity gospel preachers who had accumulated so much wealth, they would buy a jet. And that was an example. That was showing that they were blessed by the Lord and that their message was true, because they had acquired this jet through the gracious gift of the Lord because they were faithful. So it's preying upon people's kind of weakest and most urgent need is resources for their family, and it ties in with the traditional religions and cultures, and just kind of, but it's not about Jesus, and that's a pretty big problem. Was there a question? Yeah.
So I've heard from people that we know that have like immigrated from Africa to the U.S. that they will never go back to their communities for fear of being held hostage because they're seen as being wealthy. Is that ever a concern for the missionaries?
Yeah, it is. For our family, no. In Kenya, there has not been a history of hostage taking or kidnapping for ransom. That's not something that's kind of happened in East Africa. But in parts of West Africa, it has. We had, as I mentioned, the Berbers were sent to Nigeria 38 years ago. They were actually sent out with what we were using as a blitz model at that time, some 30 families. I think at the height, there was 34 families just in Nigeria altogether. And they served in Nigeria for many, many years. And then Boko Haram, which is a Muslim extremist group from the north, from the Sahara Desert, was pushing down into Nigeria, still is active in Nigeria. Boko Haram means Western education is blasphemy. So these are extremists. They announced they would be targeting white women for kidnapping and ransom. And at that point, the mission said we will be moving our families out of Nigeria. They were moved to Ghana at that point for the safety of the family. And so it does have an impact. We do see that, and we try to protect our staff as much as we can. I think every missionary is ready and willing to die for what we've been sent to do. But we don't seek it out. You know, we're ready if the Lord takes us, but we're not going to go try. And so we do try to provide for the safety of our missionaries, and that's why we have a home that happens to have the generators, because with my travels, the safety of the family is important. And we have layers like an onion of ways that we support the safety of our staff and provide the information that's helpful.
I think another time that you visited, you talked about, in America, we think we need to be sending missionaries to Africa to share the good news, but in Africa, they're seeing that Christianity is in crisis in the U.S., and so it's really coming this way.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that we kind of elevate and lift up this formation of the pastors in the same model that we use here, is because I believe in the course of my career, we will go from training pastors for the desperate need in Africa to seeing those pastors begin to travel to the United States to meet the desperate need in the United States. And so that is very much the case. And it's from around the world, not just Africa, but we do see this, especially in an era where travel is so inexpensive and easy compared to the past. And we're a good number, half of our seminaries operate in English. So these are students studying theology in English. They're well primed and well suited. And with the continued expansion of migrant communities in the United States, although with this administration that may be constricted a little, but this is historically part of our story as America. We do see pastors coming over initially to serving those congregations, and then that expands. Within the LCMS, there are a great number of LCMS congregations that host an Ethiopian language and Amharic language service in their facility on Sundays, or that host a Swahili language service in their facilities on a Sunday afternoon or things like that. So we're seeing it. As a synod, we've not quite figured out how to welcome and bring these in. There are a few congregations that are Amharic speaking, but generally they're just hosted by an LCMS congregation. They're rather informal at this point. So this is on the horizon, and it's within the church. We eagerly welcome our brothers and sisters from around the world who proclaim the gospel alongside us. Pastor.
So, and we got a couple minutes here. We support you all by regular prayer, a small amount of money. How else can we as a congregation support you and your family and the larger work in Africa?
Thank you. Prayer is the most important thing, and letting us know that you are praying for us, and that really keeps us on the field. The financial gifts are certainly part of what enables us to serve and enables us to do the work that the church has sent us to do. But your fervent prayers for us are instrumental. And we actually, as members of this congregation, in the times where we can't go to worship on Sundays, which is rare, but it happens, we watch the service upstairs. We watch the 8 o'clock service on YouTube. So we maintain a connection to you, and we hear you guys pray for us all the time. And that really is encouraging and helpful to us. The financial support of the congregation is instrumental in us doing the work and being able to live overseas as expatriates, as immigrants to Kenya. And then individual members, there's a number of you who support us individually as sponsors, and there's a form if you're interested in doing that right here. It looks like this. You can sign up and become a kind of ongoing contributor. That's extremely helpful to us. And then if this congregation has sent material goods as well, t-shirts and things like that you had that were sent over, and we generally send those into the places where there's a limited accessibility, like the refugee camps, where they can't easily acquire things like that. So real goods, the short-term teams or volunteers Those are a way that we would love to be supported, that we use, we utilize. Missionaries, missionary candidates, I will not ask you to send your pastors to serve as career missionaries in the LCMS. They will have to determine their own calls. Deliberate that on their own. But any of you or anyone you may know that you think is qualified or would do well, we're looking for that too. So, yeah, so take one of these, take a postcard. This is our current postcard with our family on it. They're on this back table back here, and pray for us. Put it in your Bible or put it on your fridge, and lift us up in prayer when you see it. And let us know that you're praying for us. We have a newsletter. You can scan one of these QR codes here for a newsletter. You can scan one to inquire about missionary service, and you can scan one to make a contribution if you don't happen to have a checkbook or cash. You can do all that online too. Can we close in prayer? All right, let's pray. Father, we thank you for your gracious love to us. We thank you for moving us. We thank you for your work in our hearts day by day. We thank you for this day where we're privileged to receive your divine service. Please be with us, especially, Lord, be with the congregation in this very place, that they may be a shining light to this community. Bless these pastors and the work you put before them in this mission field, and continue to give us joy in the work you've given each of us every day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, thank you.
Thanks for coming.